This upcoming fall brings a dramatic pattern flip, but I really feel it doesn't start until October. So let's walk through the details and start off with September 1st and take a look at the setup going forward. Because remember, we just came off Hurricane Idalia, which made landfall as 125-mile-per-hour strong Category 3 that spread all of its precipitation inland into the southeast and spreading it out in the open waters of the Atlantic. And what happens with these stronger tropical systems, they tend to take a lot of energy and they take a lot of moisture with them. And then on the backside, you're left with just kind of high and dry conditions. And high and dry heats up in a big way. And that's exactly what's going to happen as another pretty significant heat waves is going to be moving back in, especially in the middle of the country. You're going to be seeing well above average temperature anomalies, at least for your first week of September, while we're seeing kind of the opposite out west, where we're going to have a pretty significant trough come in, much cooler than average anomalies, and then wetter conditions as well. So we've got some rains moving back in the picture as far as into like Oregon, places like into California here, and then heading into Nevada, back into Utah, into portions of Idaho. While again, much of the middle of the country will continue to remain not only very hot, but very dry as well. And I think that actually continues the trend into the second week of September, where your much of the middle of the country is your hottest anomalies. We're talking possibly 10 degrees above average. Some of these areas will still actually even hit the triple digit mark, to believe it or not, while much of the western states will continue to remain on the cooler than average side and also on the wetter side too. So I think that trend continues into the second week, where predominantly the same anomalies to unfold as in the first week. Much of the middle of the country will continue to remain high and dry, and much of our northern states as well. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel, and I would love to reach 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and you can help me get there by subscribing to the channel and following all my daily content. So let's break down the details as far as the tropics. So we just went through a very kind of active pattern. I think it's going to settle down a little bit. We probably have one more storm coming in the next 10 days. So there's Franklin is going to be moving out into the open waters. There's Idalia also going to be moving out in the open waters. But then we have Jose that we'll be having to watch. We've got a fairly active wave coming off of Africa. And then most of the model guidance actually has this forming into a tropical system, if not a hurricane. And I can't even rule out this particular storm could also be a major hurricane. But the latest trends actually track it further and then actually take it out into the open sea. So let's hope that that holds into fruition. That would be about 2 weeks out. But that looks like it could develop into Jose, maybe go into a major hurricane, but then hopefully staying off the eastern seaboard in the 2-week time frame. But what's going to remain the same is the middle of the country is going to be remaining hot even on the second half. Maybe not like as hot as the first half, but still above average conditions continue for the foreseeable future, especially in the middle of the country, while much of the west continue to remain, especially the Pacific Northwest, cooler than average. And you'll start to see a little bit of a dip in temperatures up here across the Ohio Valley and then much of the Northeast as well. And then heading into October, I think that's when I think we'll start to see the beginning signs of a significant pattern change. And I think it's actually going to be coming from the Eastern Pacific. So we'll have more troughs come in off the West Coast. So we'll have these continued troughs to get the continued negative P&A off here. But I feel like these active storms down here into the Eastern Pacific are going to start to recurve. And so when they do start to recurve, that's going to be the pattern change that's going to set the tone for the middle of the country and also change the dramatic flip and wash away those, endless rain chances down here in the middle of the country, especially in the southern plains, and replace them with much more significant rains moving back in the picture. And you can see, I think the transition happens either the first or definitely the second week in October. Going into that time frame, we're going to start to see a dramatic shift in the overall setups, where I think the Eastern Pacific storms are going to kind of run into a roadblock with a much more active subtropical jet. And that's going to push the winds, the upper level winds, up and over the Baja California through Mexico and start to spread its moisture into Texas, into Oklahoma, into the middle of the country, where a lot of these areas have been kind of high and dry for much of the summer. I think things are going to be turning drastically around as we'll start to see the beginning effects of the real El Nino really starting to take shape, and it's continued to remain getting stronger as well. So I think that over time, as we transition deeper into fall, that active subtropical jet will become more active and the polar jet will become less active, and we'll see the trend transition, the deeper we get into your fall months, because you can look at the height anomalies just for October and you can kind of see that applying, right? So we'll have the lower subtropical jet start to be more active down here in our southern states, and you've got less pressure down here. So that definitely implies you'll have more substantial chances for cooler anomalies are down into our southern tier, while much of the northern tier starts to warm up. And I feel like that's the transition will be. So overall in October, we'll still be on the average to somewhat slightly below average on our southern states, while we're starting to see the more of this transition up over the ridge here with these above average anomalies up here in a good part of the northern central states through the Ohio Valley and much of the Northeast as well. And you can see where the drought is. This is where we've been for summer. Much of the middle of the country has been high and dry. They're going to a deafening drought up here and down here in Texas, desperately needing rain. They really haven't had much really all summer long, but it's really the middle of the country is really feeling the brunt of the significant weather, with just more or less these high and dry kind of weather, and much of the Pacific Northwest as well. And we're going to be seeing a dramatic flip. And I think the overall setup, and I feel like that does start that first week of October. And for the rest of October, that overall flow is going to continue. So I do feel you're going to have a much more active subtropical jet, but it's going to kick in with these Eastern Pacific storms and going to be crossing over Baja California, through the Mexico, through Texas, through the southern plains, and up to our northern central states, and up here into the upper Midwest as well. With these areas will make a dramatic flip to kind of wetter than average, with something they haven't seen in a long time. So that's a good transition on the way. And then as we flip into November, I think that's when you'll actually really start to feel the effects. The active subtropical jet will be even more active, these lower wave heights underneath, and we'll set up more of a northwest flow. So that'll pull in these cooler troughs from Alaska through British Columbia and dive it into the middle of the country and drag down that colder air all the way actually down to the south. So we'll start to see those below average temperatures start to filter into not only the middle of the states, but much of the southern jet stream as well. And even the Northeast will start getting into the action. So remember, El Nino pretty much implies a lowering jet stream. It's not really significant in the summer. It's pretty much non-existent. But once you transition into fall, and especially in the winter months, the stronger it is, the more pronounced it is. And so yes, the closer we get to winter, right, it's starting to take a little bit more of an El Nino type look. And we'll start to see more northwest flows start to set in. We'll start to see these cooler anomalies start to set in. These got these lowering. We'll have more successful cold fronts reaching further and further south the deeper in fall you get. So by the time we head into November, yeah, more of them are going to be filtering in, especially in the middle of the country, as you'll have these actier, cloudier, wetter days across these middle states and wetter, right? So I think October is going to be the beginning stages, but you're really going to be seeing the transition in November, while you'll have actually the most wettest anomalies in Texas. That's going to be a dramatic flip in the overall setup than what you're actually seeing now, where you can't even, you're begging for rain, right? So I do feel change is on the way, but it's not going to happen until the beginning stages of October. But you're really going to feel it in November, going into the central part of the U.S. with a dramatic flip, and where the most pronounced drought, where they need it the most, is actually going to be areas that are going to be seeing the most rainfall by the time we get into November, and these areas that have seen a lot of rain lately will start to cool down on the precipitation front. So I do feel that transition is going to happen, and even till we go into December as well, we'll start to again even see that more pronounced. Look at the darker blue setting up shop south into Mexico. That's a sign to say, hey, we got lower pressure setting up even south of the border here. That implies even the more pronounced subtropical jet. That actually even applies these overrunning type setups that could start to take shape as cold air pushes south. And then you're talking about possibly icy type setups, right? For good areas of parts, towards the south, as we get into the December month. So we're seeing a dramatic shift, but yeah, September looks well above average. There's no question about it. But as you transition into, going into October, you'll see subtle effects, but then you'll definitely start to see the real effects in November. And by December, you're really going to be seeing the effects of the El Nino coming into play. And of course, we won't get into the winter forecast, but that's even going to be more pronounced, especially as this stronger El Nino starts to really unfold. And so this is your first kind of look into, teasing into winter going into December. There's your active subtropical jet stream, right? I mean, it's El Nino type look all day long. You have a less active polar jet, so you have drier setups across our northern states, across the northern tier, across the Ohio Valley, the upper Midwest, and kind of much of New England. But the southern branch will be more active. You'll have this just active flow off the Pacific here, and then you'll have your lower jet stream will have these cooler anomalies, rainier anomalies, wetter anomalies, pulling not just for the southern plains, but for much of the southeast. And this will start sneaking up into the eastern seaboard, especially as that SOI index starts to drop. So we'll start to see this more active type setup. And I really feel, I'll be putting together my winter outlook, but I really feel like this type of setup is even going to be more pronounced, as we get into January, February, as well as into March. So guys, then there's your overall setup as far as your seasonal anomalies, right? So if you do the breakdown, not counting to September, because that's going to be well above average. So really October, November, and December, you've got that more pronounced type El Nino type look, lowering type of low pressures further south, and then a more, less active polar jet further north. So you'll just have more setups across the southern jet stream than you kind of do the northern jet stream. And there's the precipitation for October, November, and December. Yeah, that is a dramatic flip, folks, for these areas that have been begging for rain, begging for precipitation. Just have to wait a little bit longer. It's got a month away, but the dramatic flip is going to be, pretty dramatic. So areas that have seen a ton of rain across the northeast or northeastern states, there's going to be starting to see a lot less rain. And then areas that have just been bone dry is going to be seeing a lot more rain, and likely even see flooding, even flooding rains. I mean, they have a saying in Texas, drought ends in floods. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. So by the time we get to December, you're going to be begging to turn off the taps, because the rain, once it gets going, it's probably not going to stop. So guys, I appreciate you guys, you watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch the next update while I protect you before and after the storm.